What if the faith you've built your life on was shaped not by God, but by a political deal made in secret? What if Constantine didn't just legalize Christianity, he redesigned it? There is a question that has quietly lived in the hearts of millions of believers, a question that most churches never answer and some would rather you never ask. It's not about whether God exists. It's about something far more unsettling. Who decided what Christianity would look like? Because here's what most people sitting in pews on Sunday morning don't realize. The version of Christianity that spread across the Western world, the one that shaped cathedrals, councils, creeds, and centuries of doctrine, it didn't emerge purely from the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. It was also shaped in profound and lasting ways by a Roman emperor who may never have fully converted to the faith at all. His name was Constantine, and what happened under his rule was not simply the legalization of a persecuted religion. It was the beginning of a transformation so deep, so structural, that its effects are still felt in every church service, every theological debate, every creed recited by millions of believers today. Most of us grew up hearing that Constantine was the hero of Christian history, the man who stopped the bloodshed, ended the persecution, and opened the doors for the gospel to go free. And yes, there is truth in that. But truth, when it is only partial, can become the most powerful form of deception. What historians have uncovered, what ancient texts, imperial records, and early church writings reveal, is that Constantine's relationship with Christianity was far more complicated, far more strategic, and far more politically motivated than the traditional Sunday school version suggests. Consider this. On the night before the Battle of Milvian Bridge in 312 AD, Constantine reportedly saw a vision, a cross in the sky with the words, "In this sign, conquer." He won the battle, and then he moved, step by calculated step, to position Christianity as the spiritual backbone of his empire. But here's the question we need to sit with. Was that a divine encounter? Or was it the most brilliant political move in the history of the ancient world? Because what followed was not a simple act of religious devotion. It was a merger, a union between the power of Rome and the faith of the early believers. And in that union, something changed. Quietly, structurally, permanently. The early Christians had gathered in homes. They shared meals, prayed in secret, and lived in radical community. They had no official hierarchy, no state-sponsored buildings, no politically approved creed. Their faith was personal, dangerous, and alive. And then, almost overnight, it became official. The Edict of Milan in 313 AD didn't just tolerate Christianity. It gave the church legal standing, property rights, and, critically, access to imperial power. For the first time, being a Christian meant something socially, politically, economically. And that shift in meaning changed everything. There is a passage in the Gospel of John, chapter 18, verse 36, where Jesus stands before the Roman governor Pilate and says something extraordinary. "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight." Jesus was drawing a clear line. His kingdom operated on entirely different principles than political power. And yet, less than 3 centuries after those words were spoken, his name was being used to justify political power at the highest levels of human civilization. That tension, between the kingdom Jesus described and the kingdom Constantine built, is at the heart of everything we're going to explore together. Because understanding that tension is not about attacking Christianity. It's about recovering something precious that may have been buried under centuries of imperial influence. This is not a story about losing faith. For many people who take this journey seriously, it becomes a story about finding it. Finding a version of faith that is rawer, deeper, and far more personal than the institutionalized version ever allowed it to be. If you've ever felt that something was missing in the Christianity you were handed, if you've ever sensed that the institutional church sometimes operates more like a political body than a spiritual one, if you've ever wondered why so many of the early church's most mystical and personal dimensions were gradually suppressed, systematized, or declared heretical, then you are already asking the right questions. And asking the right questions is always where the real journey begins. If this kind of deep spiritual exploration speaks to your heart, make sure you subscribe to this channel. We go beyond the surface, because truth deserves more than a surface reading. And if you want to take this journey even further, check out our ebook, 21 Days to Restore Your Intimacy with God. The link is in the first pinned comment. It's not a theological argument. It's a personal invitation back to something real. To understand what Constantine really did to Christianity, you have to understand what Christianity looked like before him, because the contrast is stunning. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The earliest followers of Jesus were not building institutions. They were building something far more radical, a living community shaped by love, shared suffering, and an unshakable conviction that the resurrection had changed the nature of reality itself. They called themselves the Way, not a religion, a way of living, a way of seeing, a way of being human in a world that had largely forgotten what that meant. They met in homes. They shared their possessions. They cared for widows, orphans, and strangers. They prayed together with an intimacy that modern church services rarely touch. And they did all of this under constant threat. Being a Christian in the first 3 centuries meant risking your livelihood, your family, and your life. The faith cost something real, and that cost was part of what made it so powerful. The book of Acts, chapter 2, verses 44 and 45, paints this picture with striking clarity. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. This was not a Sunday morning event. This was a complete restructuring of how people related to one another. It was countercultural, in the most literal sense of the word. Now enter Constantine, and with him, enter the machinery of empire. When Constantine extended his favor to the Christian church, he did not simply leave it alone to flourish. He engaged with it. He called councils. He funded the construction of grand basilicas, buildings modeled, significantly, not on Jewish synagogues or intimate house churches, but on Roman civic halls called basilicas, the very architecture of imperial administration. The symbolism was not accidental. In 325 AD, Constantine convened the Council of Nicaea, one of the most consequential events in the history of Christianity. Bishops from across the empire gathered, many of them bearing the scars of recent persecution. And there, under the watchful eye of the emperor himself, they debated, argued, and ultimately voted on questions of doctrine. Questions like, was Jesus fully divine? Was he of the same substance as the Father? What texts were authoritative? Here is what rarely gets discussed in traditional church settings. Constantine was not a theologian. He was a politician, and his primary concern at Nicaea was not spiritual purity, it was imperial unity. A divided church was a destabilizing force in his empire. He needed consensus. He needed a single unified Christian identity that could serve as a cohesive spiritual foundation for Roman civilization. And so, for the first time in Christian history, doctrine became official, approved, enforced. Those who disagreed, like the followers of Arius, who held a different view of Christ's nature, were not simply considered mistaken brothers in faith. They were declared heretics, exiled, their writings burned. The word heretic comes from the Greek heretikos, meaning simply able to choose one's own understanding. And it was under imperial Christianity that choosing one's own spiritual understanding became not just spiritually dangerous, but politically criminal. Think about what that means. The faith of a carpenter from Galilee, a man who ate with sinners, touched lepers, and told his followers that the greatest among them must be the servant of all, that faith was now being administered by an imperial bureaucracy with the power to exile, imprison, and eventually execute those who interpreted it differently. The prophet Isaiah wrote centuries before, words that echo painfully across this history. In Isaiah chapter 29, verse 13, God laments, "These people come near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Their worship of me is based on merely human rules they have been taught." These words were spoken about Israel, but history has a way of repeating its warnings for those with ears to hear. None of this means that the Council of Nicaea produced nothing of value. The Nicene Creed contains profound affirmations of faith that millions of believers still hold dear, but it was produced in a context of political pressure, imperial agenda, and enforced consensus. And that context matters, because the questions that were silenced at Nicaea, the voices that were marginalized, the texts that were excluded, those silences shaped the Christianity that came after, just as much as the words that were approved. What was lost in that process? What dimensions of the early faith, what mystical depths, what intimate and personal experiences of God were gradually pushed to the margins because they didn't serve the purposes of a unified imperial religion. These are not fringe questions. These are the questions that serious students of scripture and history have been asking for centuries, and they are questions that, once asked honestly, open up a space where faith can breathe again. Not a faith built on imperial consensus, not a faith administered by political machinery, but a faith that is yours, personal, alive, and rooted in a genuine encounter with the living God. That is where we are headed, and that is exactly where this journey ends, and truly begins. Thank you so much for being here and watching this all the way through. That means more than you know. What Constantine built shaped centuries of faith, but what God placed inside you was never meant to be controlled by any empire. The real journey is yours to take. If this touched something in you, subscribe to this channel. There is so much more ahead. Like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and check out our ebook, 21 Days to Restore Your Intimacy with God. The link is in the first pinned comment. It might be exactly what your soul has been waiting for. Keep watching. The next videos are already on your screen.